What the Bible says about setbacks and delays. Many people in the Bible faced delays, and here are examples of how they overcame them. Abraham. God promised Abraham that he would have a son and that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. However, Abraham and his wife Sarah were unable to conceive for many years. Eventually, when they were very old, God fulfilled his promise and Sarah gave birth to Isaac. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers and spent years in prison after being falsely accused of a crime. Despite these setbacks, Joseph remained faithful to God and was eventually released from prison and became the second in command in all of Egypt. Moses was chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. However, he faced many obstacles along the way, including resistance from Pharaoh, complaints from the Israelites, and a long journey through the wilderness. Despite these delays, Moses remained faithful to God and led the Israelites to the Promised Land. David was anointed as king of Israel when he was a young man, but he did not actually become king until many years later. During this time, he faced many challenges and setbacks, including being hunted by King Saul and losing his own family and possessions. However, David remained faithful to God and eventually became one of Israel's greatest kings. Job was a wealthy man who had everything taken away from him in a series of tragic events. He lost his family, his possessions, and even his health. Despite all of this, Job remained faithful to God and trusted in his goodness and faithfulness. The Bible offers several principles and examples for dealing with delays in life. Trust in God's timing. The Bible teaches that God has a plan for our lives, and His timing is perfect. We may not understand why we are facing delays or setbacks, but we can trust that God is working things out for our good. Romans 8 verse 28. Pray and seek God's guidance. When we face delays, we can turn to God in prayer and seek His guidance. We can ask Him for wisdom and direction and trust that He will lead us in the right path. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. Persevere in faith. The Bible encourages us to persevere in faith, even when we face trials and delays. We can hold on to our faith and trust that God will bring us through the challenges we are facing. James 1 verses 2 to 4. Keep a positive attitude. We can choose to have a positive attitude and focus on the good things in our lives, even when we are facing delays or setbacks. We can look for opportunities to grow and learn from our experiences, and trust that God is using these delays to shape us into the people He wants us to be. Philippians 4 verse 8. Learn from biblical examples. The Bible is full of examples of people who faced delays and setbacks, including Joseph, David, and Abraham. By studying their stories, we can learn from their examples of faith and perseverance. Let's get into the story of Abraham's story. It is a prominent one in the Bible, spanning several chapters in the book of Genesis. Here's an overview of his story and what it teaches us about God. Abraham was originally known as Abram. God spoke to him and called him to leave his homeland and journey to a new land that God would show him. Abram obeyed God and set out on this journey, taking his wife Sarai, later known as Sarah, and his nephew Lot with him. As they journeyed, God promised to make Abram a great nation and to bless him and his descendants. Abram and Sarai had no children at the time, but God promised to give them a son. However, as time went on and they still had no children, Sarai became impatient and suggested that Abram have a child with her servant Hagar. This led to the birth of Ishmael, but it was not the son that God had promised. Years later, when Abram was 99 years old and Sarai was 90, God appeared to him again and promised to give him a son through Sarah. This seemed impossible, but God fulfilled his promise and Isaac was born. Abraham also faced other trials and challenges, such as a famine in the land, conflicts with neighboring kingdoms, and the test of his faith when God commanded him to sacrifice Isaac. Through it all, Abraham remained faithful to God and trusted in his promises. Through Abraham's story, we learn several important lessons about God. God is faithful to his promises. Despite the setbacks and delays that Abraham faced, God remained faithful to his promise to make him into a great nation and bless all the families of the earth through him. God always keeps his promises, and we can trust in his faithfulness. God calls us to obedience. When God called Abram to leave his home, Abram obeyed without knowing where he was going. Similarly, God calls us to obey him, even when we don't fully understand his plan for our lives. God rewards faithfulness. Abraham and Sarah's faithfulness to God was rewarded with a son, even though they were both well past childbearing age. Similarly, when we remain faithful to God, he blesses us in ways that we may not expect. God is sovereign over our lives. Abraham's story shows us that God is in control of our lives, even when we face difficult circumstances or setbacks. We can trust in his sovereignty and know that he is always working for our good. What Abraham's story teaches us about God is that he is faithful to his promises and that he can do the impossible. Even when things seem impossible or unlikely, we can trust in God's goodness and faithfulness. Abraham's story also shows us that obedience to God sometimes requires us to step out in faith and take risks, but that God is always with us and will guide us along the way. There are many lessons that we can learn from the characters in the Bible who faced delays and setbacks. Here are a few key lessons. Trust in God's timing. Many of the characters in the Bible who faced delays learned to trust in God's timing and plan for their lives. They realized that God's timing is perfect, even if it doesn't match up with their own expectations. Persevere in faith. The characters who faced delays often had to persevere in their faith, even when things were difficult or didn't go according to plan. They learned to hold on to their faith and trust in God's goodness, even in the midst of challenging circumstances. Be patient. Some of the characters who faced delays had to wait a long time before God fulfilled his promises to them. They learned the value of patience and how to wait on God's timing. Learn from setbacks. The characters who faced delays often learned important lessons from their setbacks and challenges. They grew in wisdom, maturity, and faith through their experiences. Trust in God's sovereignty. Many of the characters who faced delays learned to trust in God's sovereignty over their lives. They realized that God is in control, even when things don't go according to plan, and that He is always working for their good. Here are some Bible verses that you can meditate on daily when facing delays and setbacks. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Isaiah 40 verse 31. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. James 1 verses 2 to 4. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Romans 8 verse 28. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. Philippians 4 verse 13. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him, for there is a greater power with us than with him. 2 Chronicles 32 verse 7. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. 2 Corinthians 4 verses 16 to 17. Meditating on these verses can provide comfort, strength, and encouragement during times of delays and setbacks, reminding us that God is with us and will help us through every situation. In summary, when we face delays in life, we can trust in God's timing, seek His guidance, persevere in faith, maintain a positive attitude, and learn from biblical examples. By applying these principles, we can navigate delays in a way that honors God and leads to growth and maturity. And by studying the examples of these characters in the Bible, we can learn to trust in God's timing, persevere in our faith, be patient, learn from setbacks, and trust in God's sovereignty over our lives. These lessons can help us to navigate delays and setbacks in our own lives and to grow in our relationship with God.